Welcome to yet another HM2 video, and today I have three versions of this classic pedal. I have the Boss HM2 Waza, the Behringer HM300, and the Heavy Pedal Mark II from Audiority, which is a plugin. Now, I've tried a number of different HM2 style plugins, and I think the Heavy Pedal is the only one that really does it any justice, and I think it does a really good job. How well is it going to hold up against the real deal? Well, we're going to find out. For my amp today, I went with the Audio Assault HM5050, and I've got on the Crunch channel, and I'll show you what that sounds like. Finding the right amp and IR combination to complement the HM2 can be a bit tricky, but I personally like a very light breakup, overdriven amp, and I tried out a couple, and the HM5050 won, so that's the one we're going to be using today. The IR I'm using is one of my own. It's a combination of a V30 in a 412 and a Classic Lead 80 in a 212. You can check out my videos on how I made those, and you can download them for free over at my Discord if you're interested. I am using the combination of those two speakers, the Big Chugs mix that I made. And again, I tried out a whole bunch of different IRs, my own and third party, and I just thought this one sounded the best, so that's what I'm using. Of course, we have to start with my clean tone. I'll show you the clean channel and the crunch channel on this amp because I'll be using both, but mostly I'm going to be using the crunch channel, so let's hear how those sound. Here's my clean tone. And the crunch channel. I like to run an amp with just a little bit of breakup, not very much, but just enough to sort of fatten up the HM2 a touch, and I just like how it responds better than a purely clean channel. The amp EQ is basically set to noon. I cut a little bit of bass and a little bit of resonance just so that it stays relatively tight. There's no other processing going on for this part of the demo, and I am running the amp in 16 times oversampling. I have oversampling on the heavy pedal as well, and we're going to check them out with the classic HM2 settings and then dive into a little bit of some of the tonal differences they have. So let's of course start out with the Boss HM2 Waza on its standard mode. That sounds brutal, as you would expect. Let's see how the HM300 does. There is a slight difference in the EQ, and I do think the HM2 Waza sounds a little better. I would hope so. It costs a lot more. Remember, the Behringer is about a $20 pedal, and the HM2 Waza, I think, is going for about $170, which is not a bad deal considering a used old HM2, especially made in Japan, can go for over $600 now, which is absurd, but that is what it is. Now, with the HM300, sometimes it sounds better to cut a little bit of the highs to bring it a little more in line with the HM2, and there is otherwise some slight tonal differences, but let's test that out and see how well that works. I do prefer to turn down the high knob a little bit on the HM300. It does sound better that way. Either of these I think work fine in a mix. I do prefer the HM2 Waza, but otherwise the HM300 sounds pretty good, and it's pretty darn close to the original. So let's go on over to the heavy pedal, and again I have it set up the same way. I have the output on that lowered. I did notice the output is quite a bit louder on the plugin than the actual pedal. These are hitting my interface with no gain at about minus 30 decibels, and the heavy pedal was coming in around minus 18. So I did lower just the output on that plugin to match the others so it's not hitting the amp harder. Here is the heavy pedal. This is the default mod with all the knobs maxed out. Now, the heavy pedal is cool because it has a bunch of different mods, which change the EQ voicing and the gain structure a little bit. So I'm going to go through some of my favorites, not all of them because I don't use most of them, but let's go on over to the Made in Japan mod. So that sounds pretty darn close to the real deal. Let's check out the Swede. Both those mods have a different sound. I generally prefer them Made in Japan, but the Swede sounds good too. It's a little darker, a little less aggressive on the top end, and maybe a little fuller sounding. Let's also check out the new Filth mod. This one's kind of over the top and not really as close to the hardware, but it is fun. The gain on that is a little higher, and it's kind of pushing the amp too hard, so I'd have to dial things in more for that particular sound, but that's okay. So let's compare the Made in Japan mode and the HM2 Waza. Here's the heavy pedal. And the HM2 Waza. Now let's check out the Swede mod versus the HM2 Waza. We'll see how all these sound in a mix too, so we can really judge how important some of these small differences are. Let's go ahead and check out the custom mode on the HM2 Waza. This is a new mode from Boss that none of these other versions really have, and I think it sounds cool, so let's compare standard and custom modes. So, starting on the standard mode. And the custom mode. So the custom mode definitely has more gain. I don't know that it needs it, but it is there. I do like the EQ shift. It's a little brighter. I think they changed the bass and the high EQ points a little bit. So I like it. It's a good improvement. It's, again, not a huge difference, but it's definitely noticeable, and it boosts the gain a fair bit too. Of course, we could turn down the gain knob, but, well, if you want more gain, Now, this mode may sound better going into a clean amp than some of the others because it does have that extra push of gain. So let's try it over on the clean channel of the HM5050. Here is the standard mode into the clean channel. As you can probably hear, I don't love the sound quite as much on a clean channel. It sounds a little anemic. So let's check out the custom mode and see if that helps this out. I do prefer the custom mode on a clean amp, and it does give it that extra push that it kind of needs in a clean amp, but I still prefer the overdriven amp in general. Another interesting thing about this pedal is the way the gain knob works. So let's just see how similar these different clones and emulations are to how it works on the real pedal. I'm going to go back to standard mode for this. Let's turn the gain all the way off. Typically, this should deactivate the gain entirely, and we'll be left with just sort of the EQ section of the HM2. It still has gain, but it definitely has a good deal less. And you can hear when I go up a little bit on the distortion knob that it sort of engages the gain more. So listen to that again. So if you do want to use this pedal as a completely ridiculous overdrive, I guess you could. I wouldn't, but you could. Let's see what the rest of the range does. It definitely sort of has a point where it engages, and from there it does add gain, but it's adding maybe 20% or so to the overall gain. It goes from about 8 to 10. So it's a pretty extreme gain knob, but if you do want to clean it up, you can just roll the gain way back, and that can work. Let's see how the gain knob behaves on the HM300. So the HM300 definitely has less gain if you turn it all the way down, which may be more similar to the way the HM2, the original, behaved. It's definitely less gain than the Waza version here. So anything over 50% doesn't really make a big difference. It gets a little hairier, but not by much. Anything really over about 5 or 10% is a small difference, but you can hear some on the lower range of the knob where it does clean up a bit, but it's still pretty gnarly. Even with it off, there's some. So let's go on over to the heavy pedal and see how that behaves. Here's with the gain at 0. So one of the things I do like about this plugin compared to the hardware is the gain is different. It doesn't have that little sort of bump in the gain. It's very much a linear kind of gain control. So if you want less, you can get less. You can definitely dial in more kind of usable tones. I feel like the other knobs are more almost like an exponential scale, and the heavy pedal is more of a linear scale. So you can, get a little more granular if for some reason you find yourself needing to dial in exactly the right amount of HM2 gain, which I think is kind of missing the point. But, it's kind of a nice feature if you want to combine the gain from your amp and the HM2 and sort of dial it in just right. That works. Now, the HM2 gain in general is a bit, to me, like a fuzz pedal. And actually, if you look at the circuit, and CS Guitars did a good video on this, it is sort of like a fuzz circuit. It's got 4 stages of clipping, I think, but it does end up sort of square waving at the end, and that gives it sort of the response of a fuzz pedal compared to a more traditional distortion pedal or like a high gain tube amp. So it definitely has a different response. If you're a high gain player and you hate fuzz, you're not going to like the HM2. It may have a bit of a metal EQ to it, but to me, it's kind of a way over the top, extra distorted fuzz pedal. It's not great for more vintage fuzz sounds, obviously, and it's not great for modern high gain metal tones. It's its own thing, and you have to appreciate the HM2. It's like a fine wine, and it takes some time to open up to you, and you have to let it into your heart, and you have to learn how to play to the HM2 because it is its own beast, and you're not going to tame it. Many have tried, and all have failed. The HM2 reigns supreme. You just have to love it for what it is. I realized I did all those gain checks on the Crunch channel, which was not really an accident, but let's just go through them all with the gain at 0 and see if any of them will be completely clean on a clean channel. Starting with the heavy pedal. So it's mostly clean. It does break up a little bit, especially on bigger chords, but mostly clean. Let's go back to the HM2. That's definitely got a good amount of gain, and it does have that HM2 fuzzy distortion going on. So if you wanted it as a clean preamp for the EQ, would not work. Let's try the custom mode, see if that's any different. Just as before, more gain on the custom mode. Does not clean up any better. Let's try the HM300. The HM300 cleans up more than the HM2 Waza and less than the heavy pedal. So if you do want to use it as a sort of preamp without gain, then probably the heavy pedal is your best bet. But if you want the sound of an HM2 without the distortion quality, you could also check out the Grindstein plugin, also from Audiority, with in collaboration with Christian Cola. And that one, I tried it out. I didn't buy it. I don't really feel the need to do a whole review on it unless people really wanted me to. I like what it does. I think it's cool, but I don't really need it for anything. It is sort of almost a hybrid between a more modern high gain tone and this sort of sonic EQ character of the HM2. It's got a lot of nice features. I'm sure you can get lots of gnarly tones out of it, but it doesn't do the HM2 breakup thing really. And it's not because audio already doesn't know how to do it, as they did it with the heavy pedal before. But I think that pedal is not, I guess, designed to sort of be so fuzzy like the HM2 is, which makes it better if you like tight high gain tones and you don't like the feel of the HM2. But if you're looking for a kind of souped up HM2 with more controls and more flexibility, it doesn't really do the thing. It doesn't have the same distortion quality, and it's definitely noticeable, and I A/B'd both of them a lot, and yeah, it's very noticeable. So I think it's a good plugin for people who like it, and you can buy the physical hardware too. It's cool. I like it. It has the EQ character, but not the feel. And to me, the feel is kind of what makes the HM2. So, and it's not a subjective tiny difference in feel either. It's quite noticeable. It's the difference between fuzz and tight distortion. All these would work just fine in a mix, and they all do the HM2 thing very well, with just slight differences in EQ and gain. Yeah, the Waza is the best in my opinion, but they're all a little different. You may prefer something else. So I'm going to put together a little demo here so we can check out how it sounds in a mix and how different these are. Of course, I'm going to go back to the classic chainsaw settings, and I'll throw in the custom mode on the Waza as well. Now that we've heard them all in the mix, let me know what you think. Do you own any HM2 pedals, and are you a fan of it? I assume if you're watching this video, you probably are. If you've never tried an HM2, I would just download the demo of Heavy Pedal and see how you feel about it. It's definitely a different experience, and you have to go into it with a little bit of an open mind and get used to the feel of the HM2. If it was the only HM2 style pedal I had, I'd be happy with it. The Waza is nice, but it is expensive, so if you're not a huge fan of the sound and don't use it very much, then the HM300 or the Heavy Pedal will get you most of the way there for a lot less money. But if you are looking for the best chainsaw experience, I do recommend the HM2 Waza. It is a super sick, gnarly pedal. So that wraps it up for today. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to smash like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.